Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our last webinar of 2019. 2019, it's a wrap. Yes, we're all wrapping up for the end of the year and taking a look at a number of different things as we go through. So first of all, Debbie Fawcett and I would like to welcome you with us today. We're so glad that you could be with us and take time from your busy schedules is kind of moving on toward the end of the year. Also with us, we have Tico Henry. She is working on all of the different things, the audio and everything else. So hopefully we will not be running into some of those problems that we had on our last webinar. But we're glad to have you here, and let's just get down to business. So first of all, we would like to know, where are you? We have Debbie, who is down in Baton Rouge. We have Tico, who's up in DC, and I'm in Western North Carolina. So if you would, go to the question box and type in where you are at this point in time. And let's see who all has decided to gather with us for this last go-round. Well, it looks like we have people from California. Oh, we have someone from Anchorage, Alaska. Hey, glad to have you with us. Everything from Florida to South Carolina. We have people from Illinois. Oh, Barrow, Alaska. Robert Allen. I think you get the prize for being the furthest distance away from everyone. We have some of you that we see each time, which we're really glad that you are continuing on with us. We also have people coming in from Oklahoma, Texas, Virginia, people all over the place. And we're so glad that we have that spread across the country. Now, I know that for those of you who are in Mountain Time and Pacific Time, this can be a little bit challenging for you, so we really do appreciate that. But now I have another question for you. And you can answer this one on in the question box as well. So we just had the Thanksgiving holiday. What was your most favorite thing that you did or that happened during Thanksgiving? So let us know, what were you up to? Oh, Rhonda spent time with family on the beach. I know someone who would have liked to have done that. Debbie Fawcett loves going to the beach.
My number one destination. Number one destination. Yes.
And then I love this one from Amanda Moore. I ate way too much. And then we've got others who were watching movies in my PJs with my daughter. Oh, that is so great. And then I think I saw someone in there who did the same thing I did, which was naps, lots of naps. And Cindy Jones saw the Macy's Day Parade from a hotel room. Wow. And then Carmela, low-key Thanksgiving with Mexican food. Hey, sometimes you need to move away from the turkey and do something a little bit different than that. So we have people who, oh, Catherine, Skyped with family in Indiana and Germany itself. Well, it sounds like all of you had a really wonderful time over Thanksgiving. You know, it's such a nice break to have that opportunity to get together with family and friends, have plenty of football, and have all other kinds of things you can do. And of course, the day after, there's all that shopping that you can take on from there. So now you can start gearing up for the end of the year and the holidays coming up, and looking forward to 2020. So, oh, and I've got to mention this one. Linda said she celebrated with my 100-year-old mom in the house in which she was born. Linda, that had to be an absolutely incredible experience for you and for your entire family. So thank you for sharing all of those different things with us. We really do appreciate that. And it's just nice to know what everybody's doing. So what are we going to do now? Well, we're going to look at some data from this past year. We're going to look at what's working out there in our programs. We're going to have to look at some things that are still presenting some challenges. But we have one other thing that a lot of you have been asking for, and that's that chance to explore resources that you can use when teaching the Spanish GED. And time permitting, we'll take one more look at the GED.com site. So we're going to get started by what does the data tell us? And Debbie, I'm going to go to the queen of data. So you tell us, what can we learn from all the things that are out there?
Well, I think we learn a lot about, as most of you, I know when you sign up for Tuesdays for Teachers, you're also people who are very much engaged in using the tools and resources that we have out there. And of course, one of them is our GED Analytics or Analytics Lite. And we like to know that our data tells us a lot about not only just managing the data, knowing the scores, but it's also your best guide for program improvement and how you're going to make some changes, consider what needs to be touched on, or maybe what challenges or content areas you need to go back and work on. So yes, we do look a great deal at the data, not just to manage and know the numbers, but to understand how we can improve our programs and where we need to focus on the different content areas. So many of you have access to this. I understand not every state allows this access, but if you are fortunate enough to have access to GED Analytics Lite, either as a test administrator or as one of the adult educators with the Prep Connect program, it does help you to spend a little time. And my two favorite tabs, there are a lot of tabs across Analytics Lite, but the Test Taker Performance tab and the Performance Summary tab, I think really kind of drill down to the heart of where you need to be for your different programs. For example, in here, this is national, and I think this particular data was pulled probably for 2018. And in 2018, and I'm guessing it's 2018, I forgot to write in on this slide the year, but you can see how many math tests, how many tests were administered in each content area, not only the number of operational tests, but the number of GED Ready tests. And that's really important because it helps understand in your area, are people doing the Ready test before they go forward? And you'll see from this data, I know it probably isn't evenly distributed in each site and location, but nationally, we've got a pretty good correlation to people finally understanding that the GED Ready test is a very important indicator before someone should take the operational test. On the test taker performance distribution, you know we always talk about the national pass rate, and that's a compilation of the content areas kind of balled up into one overall pass rate. But when you look at the test taker performance distribution here, you can see the pass rate in each of the content areas. And when we compile that, number one, I know if you add all of these up, you're not going to average to the 78% that we usually say. Average is 78 to 80 to 81% as a national pass rate. Well, that's because there are probably a lot more math tests taken at a lower passing rate than a social studies test. So I promise you, Marty Kay and his team have the empirical evidence to stand behind these numbers, and we have the detail work. The other thing for you to understand is within, for example, the 79% pass rate on math, look below at 74% of that 79 passed at high school equivalency. And then you see the breakdown in the number that passed in college ready at 165 to 174, and the number who passed at college ready plus credit. And yes, I do know that if you add all of this up, it doesn't always come up to the perfect number of past percentages above, and that's because we round up or down in each one of those areas. But again, you can see right here, no surprise, math is where people have the most problem in the number who passed the test. And science, believe it or not, right now is where they're having some of the greatest successes. And we can talk a little bit about the transferability of information between the science and math and the RLA and social studies that help you on these tests. So again, you all have access to this. I think sometimes we gloss right over it and don't take time to really study it. So I'm probably giving you too much information, but I want you to see how we look at this data. Next.
Debbie, if you could, I mean, just thinking about this, I mean, look, if everyone looks down at that College Ready and College Ready Plus credit, because there's so much emphasis within WIOA for programs to have people who are moving into postgraduate, into post-secondary, that, just looking at RLA, that there were 10% of those passers who scored college ready. Well, when you start thinking about that, that's roughly 16,700 people. The percentages, I think you've talked to me about this before, is that sometimes we see the percentages and we say, oh, well, that's not a very big number. But when you think about almost 17,000 people who were at college ready, and we don't focus a lot on those areas, but what a difference that makes for that person who's going to go on in and have those skills that they're going to need as they move into a vocational program or into a degree program of some kind.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the way Susan's coming up with that number, look at the RLA College Ready 10%. Then look above at the 199,550 tests that were administered. 10% of the people who took that test were college ready. And I always say percentages leave you weak, but if I translate that into the number of warm bodies who could benefit from any of the benefits of the College Ready program, those are thousands of people, and we need to be cognizant of that. Okay. GED Ready test taker performance. This is, again, the same sort of information that we look at across the board. When you want to see how people are scoring on the GED Ready test, look at that. In math, we have the three ranges: not likely to pass, too close to call, and likely to pass. Well, it's very encouraging to see that, unlike when we first launched the test, because you guys did not have a test you could use that would kind of tell you where students were, because it takes our publishers time to get in line behind any new test. But now I see that the GED Readies are being used as they were intended, more like the capstone. It's like, when I think somebody's getting close to ready, let's see how close they are. Because if you'll look at the number of people who took the GED Ready test, the majority of them were in the likely to pass range across the bottom there. And so what that tells me is, as you are teaching students, you're not saying, well, let's just go take the test and find out where you are, because that could be very frustrating if they're nowhere near ready to take the test, and to get all of that feedback, it could impact them negatively. But to work with them and feel they're ready, these are the kind of trendings that we want to see in the test taker performance distribution, that by the time they get to that test, the majority of them are in the likely to pass range, and the next overwhelming large groups are too close to call, which is not a great deal of difference between preparation to get them across the finish line. Susan?
Debbie, we have had a question from Maximiliano, who says, how can we improve that math percentage? What do you have? What are some recommendations you have?
I think when we're looking at the math percentage, so that we don't have so many going back and having to test and retest on math, what Susan and I both know, and many of you sitting in this audience know it also, in math especially, we cannot, the majority of them come to us well below being ready for high school equivalency level work. And if we don't invest the time and energy in the basics, and we do not make assumptions that they know those basic concepts that we taught in the 4th through the 6th grade, you're not going to go back and teach them all their multiplication tables, but there are concepts and strategies that we can use to move them beyond, to understand multiplication, fractions, to understand ratio and proportion, to understand square roots and exponents. Time spent in the right way on the basics, once you've got them grounded in those basic concepts, and sometimes it's real hard for us to go back and say we have to go that far back, but we really do have to go that far back. And if you invest the time and energy in those basics, then the rest of what you have to do to get them ready for high school equivalency work is building upon that foundation, and it goes much more smoothly because you're just developing a little more difficulty in each one of those phrases.
And we do have one other question coming in about recommendations with writing, but I think what we'll do is we'll hold that just a little bit until we get into the next part of this particular webinar, and we'll try to talk more from there. So Debbie, how about those average scores out there?
Well, there's another thing that we like to point to, our average scores, our average passing scores, and look across the board there, folks, because you can see our average passing score is well above the 145 that we had designated as passing. I think it does us good to remember that the 145, actually, when you're looking at those lower numbers, what those 145s represent, 145 to 148, that is the lower end of your graduating class. Yet, there are a lot of students that make C's and D's and never see an A on their report card, but they graduate. Do we believe a 145 is college ready? Absolutely not. But if we say we're going to represent all graduating seniors, we had to look at the numbers that represented graduating seniors from the lowest to the highest. And 145 may be the cutoff, but you all are well preparing students who are scoring far better than the lowest score for passing. So that's our average passing score. The other thing is, look how close your non-passing scores are. When the average non-passing score is no more than 5 points in any one place away from passing. So you don't really see a lot of, and this is good. We don't want people wasting their money and taking the test without being as best prepared as possible. So when you're scoring within 5 points of passing, you're very close. The one thing you don't want somebody at 140 to do is decide, well, let me just take it again and see if I can knock out another 5 points. That's not going to happen. But the 140 to the 141 as the average non-passing score tells us that it's not that they perhaps don't understand the fundamental concepts, it's that they're not grounded in being able to represent them consistently in the test. So that's what that average non-passing score tells you. That means they're hitting or missing, getting the problems right. They are not consistent. When they are consistent, they will hit the 145 and above. And the overall passing score between the passing and the non-passing is pretty self-explanatory. Another thing to look at, though, look at your GED Ready average passing scores. When we tell you that the GED Ready is aligned with the GED operational test, you can see from the average passing scores on the GED Ready, 147, 148, 152, 149, they are not far off the mark from the overall average passing scores. And that's what you're looking for. We know that this test, the last time we did research, it still is consistently 83% reliability, that what you see on the practice test is pretty much where you will be on the operational test. Okay. Here are some other things that we like the bar graphs. We all love raw data, but this helps put in a very visual way to understand that, the majority of the people who are taking this operational test, you're doing a good job of not sending them in too soon. Look at the math test scores where the cursor is. 42.5% score between 145 and 154. And then look forward, how many other percentages. So the overwhelming, percentage of people are passing the test. You've got 33% in math who are not passing, 33 plus 3, 60%, over 60% of the people who take the math test are passing it. Less than 40% are not passing it. Again, the score distribution, people are going in to take the test and they're pretty darn close to passing. Because look how close the 135s to 144 are, the high percentage. And that translates all across the 4 content areas. You can look at the bar graph. The majority of those people are scoring in the 145 to 154 range and forward, and look at the high percentage who are just before crossing the finish line, right before 145, at 135 to 144. So these are the places you want to see. Science is kind of the anomaly, but look how many people are passing the science test right out the bat. And so that's why you just don't see many people who have to come back who are scoring below passing, because so many people are having success on the test right away. Okay? Another thing, these are, now we like to show these. I want to make sure you know that students answer some demographic types of questions in the scheduling process when they're going to take the test. Many of these questions are optional, so we're not going to say this represents every test taker who went through the process, but we do try to glean some information to better understand our test takers, because I think it helps you craft your program, it helps you craft your recruitment. So take a look at these areas, why students take the test. You know this. As an adult educator, you could say this, but isn't it great to have a beautiful graph or a pie chart or a bar graph like this, so that when you're talking to a Chamber of Commerce or you're talking to a literacy organization or the Rotary who wants to support your program, you can say, here's something you can look at. People love visuals. So we want to make sure that you're using these charts and graphs to your benefit to help promote and sell your program to your partners out in the field. So that's why we wanted to include some of these charts in there. Next. Again, all the information that you know about your students, that you report to the federal government, that you report on your accountability reports, make sure you understand that when you need to show it in a visual way, it's right there for you, whether it's the race and ethnicity percentages to the different age groups that you can cut down. Sometimes when we get over, this tickles me because I tell Susan we are our own best example of maybe when a pie chart isn't the best. Whenever you have to divide the pie into so many parts, they're kind of hard to see. And, certainly that happens to us when we're looking at the number of people we have in the age groupings on the right-hand side over there. But again, just a visual reminder of what you can do to tell your story to the people that you need to understand why it is we do what we do, and for the big impact in the services that we have on our adult learners.
And there's one other thing I would like to talk about just briefly, and it's in this our wonderful pie chart where we have all these different pieces. But take a look at our average age. It's 26. Now, and think in terms of, and if you were to take a look at all these different pieces here, where do we see the biggest group? It's age 20 to 24, right in here. But that opens up some interesting things in terms of thinking about the different generations that we have within our programs, and then those that move on to test. And so one of the things that we really want to do is, keep in mind that different generations of students have different learning preferences as well as different learning needs. So keep that in mind as you're moving forward. We tend to, as teachers, we teach the way we were taught. And Debbie and I are both boomers, so we have a certain way that we may normally approach things, but we know that when we have groups who come in for professional development, that they're very different generations than we are. So you have to change things around a little bit. And so as we move into 2020, one of the things we will take a look at within one of our webinars will be looking at how do we make adjustments within our classrooms to address these really different needs of the different generations that are in our classroom, because that can make a big difference as well in helping prepare our students as we're moving through. So even though you have already seen the data as Debbie has walked you through it, there's a GED blog out there. I don't know if many of you are aware of it, but that's where we need to know that science has that 90% pass rate, which is absolutely fantastic, because many times our students are worried about science itself, and they have to understand that as they're working within this, that science, a lot of this is about being able to read effectively, and use their critical thinking skills so that they can eliminate possible answers and work with others. Now, the other thing is that obviously students and you are doing a lot more work now with your diagrams and your graphs and your charts and all of those different things that students encounter on this test, because that makes a big difference in how well students are doing. So I think you should all be extremely pleased with what you're seeing in terms of the students as they're going through. And maybe as you talk to students, you can let them know that maybe they don't need to have such fear about science as they're moving forward with this. So that leaves us with a couple different things here. Where should we focus? Well, we've had two things that have come up just recently, and one of those is social studies. We've had a number of different people who have asked us from different areas. My students are struggling some with social studies, so what is it that I can do in order to help our students? Now, keep in mind, we have students who that average age was 26, and maybe they're not the greatest fans of history, or maybe they see it as just a little on the boring side, which is what I did early in life. But what can you do? You can take on an issue, something like voting rights, and you could actually take students through a very brief history of the US just by using a timeline. Now remember, on social studies, you could actually have students who encounter a timeline, and maybe they haven't worked with one before, or if they have, it's been a while. This is an example of one, Read, Write, Think, which is from the National Council for Teachers of English. On their website, they actually have a timeline maker, and you can go in, it's free, and create your own timeline. And that timeline, then you can print it off and distribute it to your students. It's a great resource for any classroom, and you could do any number of things with it. You could set up something like this where students could even set up their own timeline. What's happened over their lifetime? What is the history of their lifetime? But it is a way to begin to address some of the big ideas in social studies. And remember, when we go back and we talk about this, is reading, again, is a huge issue within social studies. Our students need to be effective readers, but not just little short passages. We also need to make sure that they're able to read those primary sources. and just short snippets. Please know that no, they're not going to be encountering these long, long passages, but primary sources can give you a lot of information you can work with students. A couple of recommendations: make sure that your students have a basic understanding in social studies of the Declaration of Independence, what it was, why it was done, what it led to, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. That gives them a nice foundation for having that information about government, and that's another huge part of what we have. And now, as we're heading into 2020 and an election cycle, what a great time to be talking about all of these different pieces as we're going through. So keep that in mind as a possibility. And so the website, again, for those of you who are asking, is Read, Write, Think. And that's from the National Council for Teachers of English. It's a wonderful source for lots of different information, but the ability to build those timelines is absolutely excellent. Anything else, Debbie, from a social studies standpoint that you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so in the social studies. Susan, I might want to go back and address a question, though, that one question that was in there that asked, why are social studies and science always higher? And I think Susan and I both have our own answers and indication, but from my perspective, I think it goes without saying, math, we understand, is difficult. You know, it's pretty simple to understand why social studies and science are higher than math. Everybody understands the challenges students have with some of the basic concepts. I think what differentiates social studies and science as test areas they can score higher in is there is, in the RLA, you still have the extended response, and that will provide a challenge that is not in the science and the social studies. I can tell you one thing, though, science and social studies for a time were not the highest. It used to be RLA, and what that tells me now is, as teachers, we've gotten much better about understanding the concept and the curriculum that has to be taught, and the vocabulary and the concepts in science and social studies, so that now we do see them as the test that people are scoring higher in. At first, it wasn't the case because it was still as much reading and reading for understanding, and people hadn't gotten up to speed on the particular strategies and content. But now that we have done that as a group of teachers, we're seeing science and social studies as the highest scoring test, and the same problems we've always had with the basic foundations and concepts in math are still shown in the test, and also in writing, in the writing component. So, Susan, I don't know if you have anything different to add there, but that's my answer,
No.
and that's as probably, I was going to say that's as unofficial as we can make it, but I'm giving you from my perspective, so.
Well, and I still think that with our students in science and social studies, one of the big benefits that we have been seeing now over time is the more visuals that are used in classrooms. And so the fact that you're using photographs and political cartoons and doing timelines and diagrams and really helping students understand the different types of graphs and how they're used and how to create them, that's had a big payoff in those two areas. And so I think that makes a big difference as you're moving forward within this.
Okay.
Let's see.
We've had some questions about math, but I think you're going to hit some of this later that we can answer a little later. We do see the questions on math, though, and let us get a little further down in the presentation because I think we can address it better there.
Okay, and then here's the big one sitting out there, and this impacts every test. It has a profound effect especially when students have to go to write an extended response, is that our students need more practice reading. They need opportunities to read every single day and across different content areas. And just if you take a look at this particular slide, yeah, I mean, for many of us out there, I mean, these are just givens. We read a lot because it's enjoyable. It gives your brain some time to kind of, you know, relax from different things. But our students need those opportunities to read so they can build their vocabulary. They can become more comfortable with the process itself. Many of our students coming in, they're often slow and laborious readers and they don't like to read. Well, if something is a real chore, like exercising, I don't like to do that either. So, you know, why would I want to do some of these things? But if we can give students an opportunity to read and to work within a lot of different types of text and things that are really interesting, then I think that could make a big difference for students. So one thing that we would say across the board is if you can expand in any way the amount of time that you spend having students read, or that you're doing some basic instruction in reading, and I'm not talking about reading pages and pages and pages, but reading short passages and being able to talk about them, to discuss different things, to find evidence in different things that they read. That gives students a real opportunity to build those skills that they're going to need when they get to writing. Because when it comes to writing, what we have found, you know, as we take a look at many of the things that we see, and teachers often will send me examples of some writing that students have done, and they want to kind of have some feedback. And what I often see within that is that it's really all about the claim. Well, how do you make a claim if, just like we had on the other one before, you haven't read and analyzed the text? And so what we want students to be able to do is dive deeper into the writing itself. We want them to understand how to build a claim, how to build it effectively. I believe, or, you know, such and such a passage is better supported because, it's that important word, because. And there's reasons beyond that where students have analyzed and evaluated text. But these two fall right together. The students who are stronger in reading and having that ability to analyze and evaluate will be better able to write that claim and build out their extended response. We had a question a few minutes ago about why are my students still not earning points on this particular, on the writing itself. And a part of that comes back to that inability that they have to write an effective claim. A claim should serve as a roadmap. It starts out from your own location and moves you through to the conclusion. But that claim sets that whole roadmap into operation. From there, you move to the different pieces of evidence that you have, a counterclaim, and then on up into the conclusion. One of the, as you look back on the GED.com website and look at the webinars, we've done some webinars that address some of the things that you need for that extended response. But one thing that you want above all else is to start here. The student who builds an effective claim tends to have an extended response that is organized, it's easy to follow, it incorporates specific types of evidence, and it brings the reader through what they've written. Rather than, and here's what students are still doing, we're still seeing students who don't do an argument, they actually do two summaries of each of the passages that they read. So as you look at their writing, keep one thing in mind. Did my students just write a summary? If they did, then you circle back and we go back to what is an argumentative essay? What does that really mean? And help students work from there. So if I can give one piece of advice, spend a lot of time right here on building an effective claim. Now, the other one, math. Okay, Debbie said it. She said it really well. It's this word right here, consistency. And I love the fact I have a period before the sentence. That's a new grammar one for even me. But students in math, they need to build mathematical fluency, consistency, and conceptual understanding. Those are the things that we're missing. That group of students who are scoring between 135 and 144, it's this piece where they're hit or miss. Sometimes they may get it right. Another way that a question is presented, they won't be able to do the same thing. Debbie mentioned things like exponents. That can make a big difference. Because what we really don't want our students to do is, with all that computing power in this electronic board, I bet it could take care of this itself. That may be our students where they're so used to that technology that they just want to be able to go in there and find an answer somewhere. But really it comes back to students having built their foundational skills, really owning those skills, and then being able to work through to solve problems. One other thing, always keep in mind CRA. Students in your classroom, your ABE students especially, often lack that real conceptual understanding. They may be able to spout off something because it's they've had rote memory. I can say 6 times 7 is 42. And I can spout that off all I want, but do I really understand what that means? That basically, you know, it's repeated addition. Students who don't have that foundation, they have trouble moving over here into the abstract. Most of our materials focus on the abstract, but we have students who need the concrete. And so that's why we're big advocates of using manipulatives and concrete materials in the classroom. Last year, one of our biggest draws at the GED conference was the sessions. We had 2 of them that we did on algebra tiles, and everybody just had a lot of fun, but they were all just, why didn't I learn something like this? Well, that's because many of us learned it over here in a different way. So if you can improve from this standpoint, moving concrete to representational to abstract, and your students have that conceptual understanding, the fluency and the consistency will come along with that. And we do have a number of different webinars that are archived on the GED website that can help along with those. Debbie, how about anything else from a standpoint of the math?
Well, we did have a couple of questions, and I think now would be a good time to sort of address it. I did look back in the notes, and when we talked about the percentage of people, the passing percentage on the math test, and I do believe one of the reasons it's lowered, but I will have to check this out with Marty, and you guys are welcome to email me for a follow-up. But one of the reasons it is lower is it probably includes every time a single person tried but did not pass. So, you know, that brings down the passing percentage of the number, you know, the percentage of people to pass the math test if they included the times that they did not pass it with the times that they did pass it for those that did not pass it on the first time. So that's one response, and I will dig into that a little deeper. And for those of you who are interested, my email is always available to anybody. The other thing is, how do you bring those math students along? One of the people was very concerned about, how do we give them more time? And I'm not exactly sure what that question was, because from the GED perspective, we don't want anybody to take the math test until we believe that they've had time to master the material and take it. So if there is some artificial barrier imposed on getting in and through a math test in a certain period, yeah, I know that would not be always the best situation, but it's not a barrier that we put from GED. And so those were the two things I saw on math, and needing more time to teach the concepts. And we would agree with you. You take as much time as you need to teach the concepts. We also understand that you all are never lucky enough to have leveled classrooms. In other words, teaching just ABE or just, ASE or GED level, but that you've got to blend those two. But nonetheless, we would never want to try to rush a concept along and bring them at their pace so that it is learned and can be evidenced with some consistency.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind too is that for many of our students, a lot of what they focus on when it comes to the math is they want to learn what they need just to pass the test. And so if you can incorporate more of the reasons of how they're going to be able to use this the day after the test. I always try to think in terms of, I'm not just trying to get the student to the test. I want to get the students to the day after the test and what they're going to do with it from there. Taking a contextual approach can also make a big difference in how students respond and how they handle things. The other thing is that, we have many students who are maybe with us 2 days a week, 3 days a week. They come into a class that may be 2.5 hours long. They need something in between class that helps reinforce. And so there may be some online resources that you can use with students to help them keep working at it. All of these things, they take time, but at the same time, many of our students could be doing more outside the classroom, which is not something we typically do in our adult ed programs, because we know our students have busy lives, but at the same time, it can make a big difference in how they're going about what they're doing. So you have asked repeatedly, you'll say, Debbie and Susan, do you have any kind of resources for Spanish? So we spent some time taking a look at different things that are out there. And so we're going to move into that. But first, Debbie's going to talk just a little bit about a reality check when it comes to our Spanish rates.
Sure. We certainly, as a company are very dedicated to making sure that our Spanish language speakers have that opportunity to take the test in Spanish. But I think it's also very important to understand the passing rate, the national pass rate. And I just pulled it for 2017 and 2018. This is not something you can look up in analytics. I have to go to our gurus that manage analytics and have them do this particular report to do a comparison of the Spanish language speakers and how they do on the pass rate on the Spanish test. So you can see there is a marked difference in the pass rate, and we have lots of ideas and lots of possibilities for why that is the case, especially in the RLA portion of the test, where everybody thinks, oh, well, we should, we speak Spanish, so we should take the test in Spanish. Sometimes we found that actually taking the reasoning through language arts in Spanish is harder for a Spanish speaker than taking it in English, because although they may speak Spanish very fluently, their writing skills are poor in Spanish. These are just some of the observations we have, but we think it's important that you understand the pass rate. And if you're looking at those levels, give some serious consideration when you're deciding, will they be testing in Spanish or English? It's fortunate if you're in the state that allows a student to take to combine languages, because then you can make some choices for students about should they take this part in Spanish and that part in English. But I think it's a reality check just to understand where we are with the pass rates for these different languages on the test. Okay? Here is another bit of language information. I wanted you to see, depending on what state you live in, I mean, if you're in California or Texas or Florida or certain pockets of some other states, you know, you have a huge number of Spanish language speakers who are interested in taking the test in Spanish. But I wanted to share those numbers nationally so you would see what percentage of the overall population of test takers are made up of folks who take the test in Spanish. So I think these numbers kind of speak for themselves in the 2017 and 2018 data. And again, this is just for informational purposes, because sometimes, depending on what your reality is, it may not be the same as the rest of the countries for how many people you thought were out there in need of the test in Spanish. Okay?
Okay, so let's talk about some resources. Now, all of you are aware that, you know, that Paxson and Kaplan, I think Kaplan as well, a lot of the publishers, they do have usually a big book when it comes to Spanish, one of the GED books. But I want you to think beyond a workbook or a textbook. I want you to think about resources that are out there that you can access. I tried to go through, and the things that I picked out here, with the exception of Teachers Pay Teachers, most of these things are free, but they are resources that you can use in the classroom itself. And so as you take a look around here, this is CNN and Espanol, and you also have a number of other things. So I'm going to take you through some of these just so you can see the different components. And also, while I do this, let me make one more comment. If you take a look at your menu over on the right-hand side, you'll see where it says handouts and it says 2. You have 2 handouts that came along with this presentation, and you can download them before you leave the webinar itself, or usually by the end of the week, they're posted on the GED webinar archives. One is the actual PowerPoint. The other one is the resources for the Spanish GED classroom. And so keep those things in mind as you're going through, that you'll have those resources. So let's take a look, and here's the first one. You may not have heard of the Health Camp Association, but it basically is an organization that has been set up working with migrants and students who are coming through. They want to get a high school equivalency program. They have a number of different Spanish, GED, HSE class resources. If you take a look within these, there's everything from the National Library of Virtual Manipulatives, which also is provided in Spanish, to Mathematics in Mexico. It's an online resource. This particular one here, gedonline.org, does have a cost for it, but that's something that it's not necessarily one that you would necessarily want to do, but you can take a look at these different types of things that are included here. And so as we take a look at this, let me just pull over here. You can see the other, this is the rest of their menu. Now, we'll tell you this Spanish GED writing is actually from the old test, so it's not based on the new one. So what you want to do is take a look at some of the other materials. The Goodwill Community Foundation has some excellent resources that are available in Spanish. There's also things from the National Library of Medicine, National Institute of Health, which is also in Spanish. All of these different resources can provide you in the classroom with a number of different things that you can use. Now, in some cases, what you would want to do is if you have computer access and you have internet access, there's things that students can do online. Otherwise, there are things that you can print and then you can distribute within the classroom itself. Don't discount materials that are out there just because they don't say GED in front of it. What we have to do is take a look at the different types of things that are available that will work for us. This one for specifically, the History Channel in Spanish. If you have students who need to understand more in government and history, that's an excellent site to use. History Channel is a great site to use, period. But the one that's in Spanish, if you actually had students as well who were working toward the citizenship test, they have a lot of resources there as well. The Spanish GED 365 also includes materials that you can find. So again, looking at the Goodwill Community Foundation, just to give you an idea, these are the different areas where they have materials. This is coming from that Goodwill link that you will see. It's if you want new words, practice your reading skills, or look at the basics in math. We don't always talk about that within our ESL classrooms or within Spanish GED, but we set the same issues as we're moving through. And look at the core skills. In math and reading, they're not going to take you into real high-level algebra, but at the same time, you have the different resources that are available here, reading activities, grammar activities, all of the different things that you can see. And then, of course, there's other areas here that you would find typically when you're working within ESL. USA Hello. This is another site that is out there. And for those of you who don't speak Spanish, and I don't read Spanish either, but USA Hello is all about working with refugees. It comes to the refugee resettlement centers, and it has a number of different resources in education all about the GED, or if students are taking high set or task. But they have another group of materials that are there. Well worth taking a look to see the different resources available. Now, why would I put CNN here? Well, number one, that's to help students in terms of being able to learn more about what all is going on within their communities, within the world. But the other part, as Debbie said earlier, our students, they tend to be incredibly fluent speakers of Spanish. That may not be the same as their reading skills and then their writing skills. And remember, when they go to take the extended response in RLA, they're going to need that combination of effective reading skills as well as writing. Well, what better way to build those reading skills than by using something, the different articles from the news itself. In some cases, there are videos that, of course, this hooks into, but some are the different reading pieces where they could actually write about what they just read from CNN in Espanol. So those are pieces that, we often think, well, but that's not a workbook. Well, they're not going to be using a workbook every day of their lives. This is something that could make a huge difference. Now, one step further. This is an online newspaper from Puerto Rico. And so we have many students who would enjoy having that opportunity to look at the news from their own area, where they grew up within Puerto Rico, maybe because of the storms they have moved into Florida or other places. But this would be an excellent way to build those reading skills. Not only that, with newspapers, you have graphics. You can have students work on opinions where they understand what is the difference between fact and opinion. There's so many different skills. Now, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, you notice up here it says in English. So you can actually change over to the different different newspapers. And there are others that are similar to this. This is another, I pulled this one specifically because it deals with grammar and writing. And so this is called SpanishResources.com. And this is just one screenshot of the actual resources that are there. But you can see reading and writing. They're using verbs, adverbs, listening skills. In this particular one, you can see they have some persuasive essays, working with pronouns. So, and this is not the only thing that's included on that website, but it is a wonderful one to go out and just explore at different levels. So it's not just all at a high level, there's a real mix of different materials and activities. Many of these you can just print off and use them in the classroom itself. Another site. This is called OER Commons. It is Open Education Resources. This is a tremendous site in terms of the types of materials that you can find. These are all open source, which means that they're you can use them in the classroom. You don't have to worry about the different copyright issues that are available there. This is a great source for those of you teaching English or teaching just regular GED, or if you're doing Spanish. And I'll just give you an example. This is from their adult education collection. You can see they have 284 resources available. And this is one about the Declaration of Independence. It is a reading selection. You can go through, there's, as they put, no strings attached, meaning that you do not have to worry about any type of material resources as far as the copyright goes. And this was just an example. You're going to want to take a look at OER Commons just to see the types of materials that would be interesting to you within the classroom. This is an example in Spanish. This is Spanish grammar and context. That's an issue. As Debbie said, when they're writing, they may be fluent speaking Spanish, but their writing and their grammar in Spanish is not as strong. This actually comes out of the Spanish in Texas project. They have video examples as well as practice quizzes. And you can see here just going through all the different parts of speech. But these are all things that can be extremely useful to you as you're helping students gain those skills that they need for trait 3 on the GED test, on the rubric itself for the extended response. And don't forget the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. They have a number of different resources. They have questions in civics and government. And remember that 50% of the GED test focuses on civics and government, on the social studies. So that's a large percentage. And for many of our students, English and Spanish, they could stand to learn more about civics and government itself. So this could be one. Civics flashcards. You have a Spanish version. There's also an English version. And then they have a number of different files that you can print and distribute to your students. So again, an excellent resource. And of course, it's free. One of the things that I spoke about earlier was the need for our students, just because they're taking the Spanish version of the test, they're still assessing the same content in social studies. And so our students who are taking the Spanish test, it wouldn't be bad for them to be able to see those documents and to use some of them. So here's your declaration, your constitution, all of those things are included, plus there are other resources that are available to you for social studies through the National Archives itself. One more from, this is Practical Money Skills. I have been receiving updates from them now for probably the past 6 or 8 years. Practical Money Skills was originally set up by Visa, and it is a website that focuses on money skills. Our students can definitely use these across the board. There's no advertising here that's trying to push someone to get a Visa card, but what they are doing is they're going through and they're talking about economics. So the basics of economics, as well as a lot of information in terms of resources that are out there, things that that you can do in terms of budgeting, those types of things. So don't forget this, Practical Money Skills, as one of those contextualized ways to approach some of the math instruction that you want to do. Now, many of you have seen this particular site. It's called Math is Fun, or it's originally Maths is Fun because it is from the United Kingdom. But if you just do a Math is Fun, it'll come up either way, with or without the S on math. But if you notice up here at the top, you can pull it in a number of different languages. So maybe you need it in something besides Spanish. You can pick the language that you need. All of the materials are here, and you can see how it goes through all the way from numbers to algebra and geometry. So everything that you could want within that. This is a site that in the classroom I would recommend using because, one, you have a lot of resources you could print, but also it has online quizzes so students can test their mastery in different areas. And AAAno.com. When you go into the site itself, it will come up in Spanish and English. All you have to do is change the language over, and it provides, this is the 8th grade level math. It will provide you with all these different areas. And then what it does is it gives an explanation, and then it gives sample problems. So students can work with this. This one would require that students have access to a computer. They may be able to pull it on the smartphone as well and use it from there. And then the Khan Academy has been working really hard. They have had a site that has included Spanish. However, they have now expanded that site out, and they have a new page which looks like this. And so now all of those wonderful Khan Academy videos in so many different areas are available in Spanish, and that can be very useful to our students. You can access it, students can access it, and remember, everything with the Khan Academy is free. And that's a great resource for our students who are struggling with some of the higher order math, especially, to have those videos that they can listen to and watch all the different things that are going on. And this is something for those of you who've been in different sessions with us, you've seen us refer to the National Library Virtual Manipulatives. This is their Spanish version of that website. It's also in French. So you can go and actually use this at different levels. So all of this has been translated. And one of my favorites, I think probably one of your favorites, because so many of you talk about this. Newsella has articles that are in Spanish. They have some of the latest Spanish library articles where you can do different levels of reading level abilities, just as you do with the English language articles. And I think this is no, not my last one, next to the last one. I'm bringing this one in, even though I will tell you it is a much higher level site. This one was developed by Oxford University. You can purchase a book on developing writing skills in Spanish, but you can also do a number of different things here on the website itself. But this does look at different types of text that you write. It talks about the different styles and exercises. There's reference lists for vocabulary, so many different things. But I would recommend that you take a look and see if this is appropriate for your level of students. It says it's intermediate and advanced level, but make sure that that's appropriate for your classroom before you dive too deeply into this one. And I believe in supporting fellow teachers. So if you have not yet been to Teachers Pay Teachers, I highly recommend that you do. We have wonderful teachers across this country and across the world who develop lessons and sell them on this site. Everything here is vetted by a community of educators. It's very much quality material. You can see over to the left here, you select the grade level that you're interested in. I picked up Spanish, and particularly I looked here, Spanish level readings, $5.76. You know, there's so many things here that are $4 and $5 and $1.50. I mean, plus there are free resources here as well. So consider the possibility of looking at some of the materials that are here that may be useful to you as well. So Debbie, do we have some questions?
Yes, we do. I was just kind of looking through some things. I have 3 or 4 things I think we could run down. We had one person that wanted you to again point out what's the website for the social studies timeline? Is that somewhere you'll have that in your resources?
Okay, I put that has been added into, if they will just go to Read, Write, Think, it's in the chat box now. readwritethink.org.
I see it. Yeah. Read, Write, Think, website for creating timelines. So it's in the chat box. All right. Another person recommended a great website, and we like to always pass these things along, teachertricks.org as a digital platform that would be something that you all may be interested in looking at, teachertricks.org. And in the line of a question, someone has asked, do we have the same number? What is the number of GED test takers so far from 2018 to 2019? So while Susan was busy continuing forward, I glanced through our analytics. And I can tell you that for this time last year, we are just about comparable. We were at 79% pass rate before we had the end of the year push. This year, right now, we're at 78%. And as I said, it always varies. And the number of test takers is really very comparable for the time of year. So although, I mean, across the country, we understand that test takers, the number of people taking the test, has sort of flatlined. We haven't seen a big increase, nor have we seen a big decrease. It's just kind of stable across the line. And as long as the economy is good, I don't know that we're going to see a great influx one way or the other of new people into the program. Because if you've been around long enough, you know that when people can work, they're going to put work over coming back to further their education. If they're making a wage, that sometimes they delay. But when the economy is bad, that's when they'll show up at our doorstep because they don't have jobs and they have time to invest in the upskilling and the training and earning their GEDs. So just to let you know, it's very comparable. The 2 years are very comparable. There's not been a great dip or dive either way. And here's a question. I'm not sure this is in our wheelhouse, but somebody asked, will the practice money skills satisfy the personal finance requirement for ISAEP? And I am assuming that is a local or a state program, and we would have no way of knowing something like that. So,
No, but what I would recommend is take a look at the practical money skills. They actually now have a lot of different levels of it, because when they first came out, it was kind of considered for, middle school, and then they have high school and then adult. So, so take a look at the site. It's free to join, and you always are getting information from there. Well, not always. They have a newsletter that comes out, I think, once a month, and I get that, so I know any updates. But I was able to get a full curriculum from Practical Money Skills that was, and it had all the resources that went along with it, and it was free. And there was no strings attached to that. So take a look at the site and see if you can find some things that may be helpful.
Thanks, Susan. And those are the questions that I see, unless, let me roll back up here and make sure I'm not missing any, but yep. How could so many of my passing students, we keep coming back to the question, how can so many of my passing students have 0 points on the RLA? One other question, somebody's asking if they can get these slides, and I think you've already answered that, but you can go to our website under our webinars, and within the next day or so, a PDF of this will be posted that you can download along with all the materials and handouts. So that answers that question. You can get these slides. Susan, I don't know if you want to hit on how many of students. I mean, I know it is confounding to have students who are passing the test and yet they get 0 out of the 6 points for the test, but that's a question someone's asking, and I know it came up elsewhere in here. So if you could hit that briefly.
Well, what I will say is that from what I've seen from students is that, well, first of all, students can pass the test, pass the RLA test without getting any points on the extended response. Remember, the extended response is 20%, roughly 20% of the total score for the RLA. So if a student has done well on the other parts, they may not earn any. They may write and not earn any points. But we see a couple different things that happen fairly consistently when students are not earning points. The first one is that they write summaries rather than an argumentative response. And what I mean by that is that the prompt tells them that they have to read two articles, 2 source texts, and then they're to decide which of those 2 source texts presented the strongest argument. So there's always a pro, there's always a con. So the purpose of this is for students to have read and analyzed what they've read, and then it's to actually go in and take a look at which presented the strongest argument, which convinces you the best. And so from our student standpoint, what they're doing is instead they just summarize the first article, the pro, and they summarize the con, and then at the bottom they say, well, I like the pro better. Well, that's not that's not an argument that that meets the criteria from the prompt. So that's one thing. Another thing that we find is that students, we still see students who are not spending as much time as they should with their writing, but above all, the things that I see when teachers send me things and talk to me about it is I see students who don't know how to write an effective claim. If you have a strong claim, the rest of your response will follow. But that is something that has been a problem, and maybe something that, Debbie, we need to take a look at in the new year as we look at our webinars. We may go back again and look at more writing activities. So, but for the time being, if you can see, I'm on the GED website, and if you look under Educators and Administrators and click on that, and then go over here to Professional Development Training. And here are all of our webinar trainings. And you can see that it's all about the claim. That is a webinar we did a few months ago. If you would take some time to watch it, and then you have the handouts that go along with it, I think you'll find that that can make a big difference. For those of you who have concerns about math, moving up, building better writing skills, that's another one that can be very useful in order to help you with that. So we have a whole series of different things that are archived. This is where you will find today's webinar. It will be posted, it'll pop in up here in place of teaching social studies. It'll go in this place, and you will find it has the video recording. It will have that PowerPoint, and also a handout. And let me pull over here. Oops, just a second. This is the handout that you will receive. This has all of the different URLs. So the different websites that I showed you just briefly, they are all included here. Plus, one more thing. I'll go back over to the GED site. Go back here. Take a look at the top where my cursor is, and you see it says English. All you have to do is drop down the menu, and you have the Spanish version. So that will bring you over to what our Spanish students see. Other questions?
There was one other question, and it has to do with the scoring of the extended response in English and Spanish. And yes, the English extended response is scored by the automated scoring engine. The written response in Spanish is still human scored. And so that was a question that was asked. And those go through all of our questions. So Susan, I don't know if you want to, we'll give everybody a chance to add any other questions in and make any closing remarks.
Well, just a couple of different comments here. First of all, thank you. Here it is, December the 10th, and your bright shining faces are out there. You know, we can't see you, but we know that all 100 and almost 70 of you who have been here during this one have been here, and we really do appreciate that. We appreciate all of your questions, your participation in all the different things that you have done. Please take advantage of the GED.com website. And for those of you who had been asking for the resources, we would love to know how things are going, if some of those resources have worked really well for you. I'm going to include here, yes, I am probably one of the few people left in the country with an AOL address. But for those of you who really needed a lot of these Spanish resources, if you have a chance, drop me just a quick line and let me know how they worked for you. Let me know if there are other things that you feel like would be helpful to you going through. I mean, we love having people share with us and us being able to share with you as we're going through. So, Debbie, some final thoughts from your side?
Well, I did have one final thing. We did have one question just popped in. Someone asked if there were any flyers promoting the GED in Spanish that might be used by local programs. And the answer is yes, we have posters promoting the GED, and they are written in both Spanish and English. And so if you need those flyers to post, I always tell everybody it cracks me up to walk in and find the posters, and they're lovely in the testing centers. But if they're already showing up at a testing center, they probably know you already exist. So we want to make sure that these posters go up in the community, in local stores, local programs. So if you are in need of some of those posters, you can certainly email me. You can get them on the marketplace. But if you don't know how to go there, just send me an email and we'll try to connect and get some shipped out to you. So with that being said, Susan, I too want to say thank you so much. Nobody knows like we adult ed teachers that you're plugging away until the middle or nearly end of December, trying to get those students across the line and get them through those last tests so that some of them are fortunate enough to take the next step into community colleges or four-year universities or new jobs at the first of the year. So we wish you all a very wonderful remaining holiday work season and an even better free time season at the end of the year. And we'll be getting information to you about our upcoming webinars in 2020. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you so much for a wonderful year of participation. And Susan, I'll let you say the final goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone, and that's a wrap. We're going to see you next year. Have a great holiday. And we kept in mind that some of you are kitty people and some of you are puppy people. So have a great holiday, and we'll see you in January 2020. Take care.
Bye-bye, guys.